I have impression that they are today more discouraging people to stay than really helping them to rebuild their lives. So we all came because of the war, and more precisely, we didn't want to be a part of what we saw and predict would happen in ex-Yugoslavia.
We were coming in there, and there were all kinds of people. They were organizing their life. How are we gonna get the permits? How are we gonna regularize our stay?
Do you remember the name of this organization that we set up?
Yeah, the organization. There was a discussion how we're gonna call it, and it was the first meeting, and there were all kinds of people, all kind of a discussion, and everything, and they called it Mizamir. It's called V for Peace.
I am an alumni of the Bachelor in Liberal Arts and Sciences, where I majored in international relations. And in retrospect, looking back at my study, I've come to the realization that I focused a lot on military history, and especially the war in ex-Yugoslavia. So thinking back at my study, I feel like I've put much emphasis on trying to understand where I come from and what has happened, and what has drove my parents, and especially my father, to move to the Netherlands.
I came to Amsterdam with a couple of friends of mine, and we all had pretty successful career in Belgrade, in ex-Yugoslavia. I was a philosopher, worked at the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory. A friend of mine with whom I came was an illustrator and comic artist. He was publishing in international magazines, and another friend of ours came a bit later, and he was very successful screenplay scriptwriter with several very good projects, including a theater drama and a movie, etc.
Okay, they also had a fight with enemy and
Why?
oh, same thing.
Well, it was depressing for me because I mean everything was starting as a kind of friendly attempt to help each other, and then it's continuing in direction of more and more type of political organization, and I was a bit scared. And then when people wanted
Basically what we did, we had these big meetings, and there were people not only from Bosnia or from Zagreb, or I mean from Croatia or from Serbia, but they were all over Yugoslavia were coming. And the interesting thing was that they were, despite all the conflicts and areas they were coming from, they were one big group, and they, wherever you came from, it didn't matter. It was not an issue.
I was known in the neighborhood at the time. I was living, of course, in the, cheapest and worst possible neighborhoods in Amsterdam, and I was known by the environmental grannies as someone who can pick the cheapest possible food in order to survive. And at that time, it was, well, everybody asks if it was political migration or economic migration or whatever, but that's impossible to define so easily, especially at that time, because it was still not blown off the proportions as we know later.
Hvala. Stigo je Zoran.
We were the first wave. That both logically and legally. Because legally it was a kind of a gray area at that time. Actually, when you see it in the background, we were not treated anyhow. We just came here because it was okay. But legal issues and legal problems can always be solved much easier than the real ones, and those are the life problems. In my case, I was by profession a dramaturg, playwright, screenplay writer, etc., screenwriter, and coming over here, trying to build up my life again on something which is based on lingual aspects, on the language itself, was appeared not to be possible. So what is today being referred to as re-education, let's say, or as adaptation to the particular economic situations, etc., for us at that time was a complete necessity, because of course no one can adopt immediately, you know, and no one can expect to have, you know, a job in his own profession and so on and so on. And for us, this kind of complaints sound like pure luxury.
A ima sina koji drži u štali, Ivo se zove igra.
I think that you know, they were not prepared even for from the point of view of the procedure for the legal permit. For instance, it happened that Django, this friend of mine with whom I worked, and me came to prolong our 1 year permit for another year, and we really come with absolutely identical documents, the same income, the same company, living at the same place. So everything was identical. And then we enter to two different officers and two different doors. And for instance, I come out with the stamp on without any problem, and they ask him for additional documentation.
And it was a kind of an, yeah, let's say not organized, but in a way well organized group of people that they helped each other. They helped each other with places where to stay and where to go, and how to make a living, or when to get money, or to organize your stay here.
In comparison to the people that have stayed, I've had an amazing upbringing, and how happy and thankful I am for them to bringing me here. So as part of my study of international relations, I've also focused on other militaries and other wars, like the ones at the moment in Iraq and Syria. And I've come in contact with people who have organizations here to help refugees from these countries, from these war zones, to kind of settle down and get used to the Dutch life and the language. And
came here in the 1993, and I got my first child in the 1994. You were pregnant, and in my country you are going to gynecologist. Here it's like you are dealing with a midwife, and you are supposed to deliver in house, not in the hospital. And well, for me, it was quite new things. Here are more rules how to raise your children than back in my own country. I put my children, my oldest daughter, in a crèche, because I thought that it's good for you to start to use on the language that we did not use in our home.
Also, the legal system was such that you get legal aid from the state, and so we organized that all these people put in their applications, and in the end, because there were so many of them, and it was a huge influx, and it was a real crisis, there was a real war going on, so there was no need to make all kinds of individual interviews. So in the end, many of the people who applied, they were basically they were admitted as a group.
I think that the interpretation of what was needed in order to stay was still pretty much individual, and it was not a strict procedure at that time. But then as time went and as more people were coming, I think that Dutch government realized that they have to create a bit more strict procedures and another attitude towards those war migrants.
The obligation to stay in a refugee camp didn't exist then. At least if you could find yourself a place, you were allowed to stay just in any town or any place. If you had an address and you would register yourself, you could still apply for refugee status, and you didn't have to go to a refugee camp.
With what happens today, do you think that it was a better system or a worse system? Because what happens today, it's very structured, and I have impression that they are today more discouraging people to stay than really helping them to rebuild their lives. Because what we had at that time was really like a crisis that we came from, and the personal issues and the problems, but then we had the impression that the government is supporting us along the way and wants us as soon as possible to rebuild and to start living normal lives. And today, with all these refugee camps and procedures for actually approving asylum and like a refugee status to someone, I think that people are staying for maybe a year or two or even more in a kind of limbo without being capable of building their life in a way in which we did.
They were inventive and they were creative, and they were able to find their way into society. I mean, they had artists, they had computer scientists, but they had also architects, they had musicians, they had all kinds of people who were well educated, had a lot of background, so they were able to rather efficiently and almost seamlessly enter that society, and all these people come at the same time from former Yugoslavia. So it was also kind of a note situation, an emergency situation that they had to improvise. So they let the people stay in the towns and let themselves organize, and that's what happened. And I think that because of that, let's say, lack of organization from the official point of view, they were forced to find their own way, and they did find their own way. At least many of these people were finding their own way.
I had the impression that it was more successful system of handling refugee crisis than what it is today.
Yeah.
Do you think the view on the country or on the Netherlands is different between those different times?
It's difficult to describe it from a national and an observer point of view, let's say, but I think it must make a difference, because from day one you have to survive. You have to start to speak the language. You have to start to find your place. You have to start a way to make a living from day one. You're on your own. Better to ask Simka, I think, because he knows. Because he did it.
Yeah, well, I just want to say that even though you're mentioning that there was a lack of organization, that's true if you compare
to
what it is
now.
today.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there was really there was quite some support that people felt.
Yugoslav writer at that time, Simovic, he said that a person can forget and lose his fortune, and that's okay. But he should not forget and lose his misfortune, because misfortune is what makes a man. He says misfortune is a light which enlightens your darkest night.
And visa application and the asylum seekers and the people coming from the war zones. I think the bureaucracy has changed, and coming from such a war zone, you can't just come and apply for a visa and then stay and try and survive. But you get in a hole, you get stuck in a whole system that is terrible for these people. So at the moment I'm volunteering for Newbies, and Newbies is an organization in Amsterdam and Zaanstad, and their goal is pre-employment. So what we want to do is invite newbies, so people who either have a status or don't have a status but have come as refugees, for an intake. And here we try and find out as much as we can about them, about what they used to do, about what drives them, what their interests are, what new careers they would like to make here, or what they want to focus on in their lives. And then we try and find volunteer work for them, so that at least they can have a place where they can all come together, practice the language, build a network, meet new people, but also, you know, really get used to Dutch society and what are the norms and the values and the ethics, the work ethics in this country.